Today, I want to do a video about the polling right now in 2024, and I wanted to do a little bit of an interesting exercise and just look at it really closely. So, I wanted to do this video looking back at the polls for the battlegrounds in 2020 and 2016, and I noticed that in 2020, Joe Biden was leading in the average polls by about 2.3 percentage points, and the final result ended up almost being an exact split between Trump and Biden in 2020 for the toss up states, for the battleground states. And it ended up being very, very close. And then I also got thinking, okay, well, what did 2016 look like? Just out of curiosity. And it varied a little bit. Hillary Clinton on the average outperformed Trump in the average compared to the final results. The numbers are a little bit harder to find because they don't have just one page like they do for 2020 or 2024. But we saw certain states like Wisconsin, which, for instance, had Hillary up 6, Trump won by 0.7, obviously. And Pennsylvania, whereas Clinton plus 1.9, Trump up 0.7, just things like that. And that got me thinking, okay, is there like a certain percentage wise we know the polling will be off for 2024? The truth is we really don't know because we're not really going to know how the election goes until the election happens. We can only really make our best guess. But I did find this page that Real Clear Politics did where they looked at the top battlegrounds between Trump versus Biden in 2020 and 2016. Where for 2020, Biden ended up leading Trump in the average by 2.3. And as I showed you, it ended up almost being an exact tie when actually on election day. Whereas Clinton led in the polls by 1.1 and Trump ended up winning. So you might be wondering, what am I getting at here? Well, the current national poll right now for Trump versus Harris is 1.8%. But the battleground polls, which really will decide the election, are much closer. It was 0.2% lead right now for Harris over Trump overall in the battleground states. Much closer than at any point for Trump versus Clinton or Trump versus Biden. And I started thinking, also, just for the sake of argument, by the way, Kamala Harris right now up 1.8% nationally. Joe Biden was up by about 4 points at the end of the day nationally in 2020. So I was thinking, okay, let's just say for the hypothetical situation, the polls are wrong. Not that the polls are wrong necessarily, but that their margins are off by a little bit. What would the electoral map look like? And I'm prefacing this by saying I'm not shilling for Donald Trump. I'm not saying this is going to happen or anything. I'm just saying, hypothetically, what if the polls are off by 1% of the vote? 1% of the vote, a very small percentage, a few thousands of votes here and there in these states. It's not a massive amount of numbers. And maybe there's a group of people who don't say they answer the polls and they show up and vote for the first time. It's certainly possible, and to be totally clear here, if the polls are off by 1%, that's not really the polls' fault. Because, for instance, polling is really, really tough because you're trying to get a snapshot of the election at that time. You can't control how people are going to turn out and vote. If someone says they're going to vote and they don't, or they do, or they don't say they will and they actually end up voting, it's really hard to account for those things in polls. So it doesn't necessarily mean the polls are wrong. It just means that there was a different outcome of voter enthusiasm and turnout than the poll initially expected. But that doesn't discredit the poll. The point I'm getting here is, for the sake of this hypothetical, I'm going to fill in the electoral map as it is right now for Trump versus Harris, and I'm just going to add 1% of the vote for Trump after I do that to each state, just to give you an idea of how close this election really is. Again, this is just a hypothetical scenario. This is not set in stone. So first, we're going to go to the state of Arizona where Trump is up by 1 point. So we're going to give Donald Trump Arizona right now where he is leading by 1 percentage point. I'm going to put in tilt, excuse me. Now I'm going to go Nevada where Harris now leads Trump by 0.6% of the vote. So I'm going to put Nevada into the tilt Harris Waltz column at this time, 232 to 230. Next, we're going to look at the state of Wisconsin where right now Harris is up by 1.4%. And by the way, I showed you in the last video, I'm not saying this is happening, but Clinton and Biden both led Trump by 6 points in Wisconsin and were off by at least 6 points both times in 2016 and 2020. So that could be something to keep an eye out for. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying keep an eye out for it. 1.4% for Harris in the state of Wisconsin. That is still considered tilt, but very, very close. 242. Next, we're going to go to the state of Michigan right next door, 1.1% for Harris over Trump. That's actually getting very, very close. Much closer in the last few days or so. The numbers have gone down. 1.1%. Now we're going to look at the state of Pennsylvania, an exact tie. We're going to leave that the way it is. North Carolina, 0.7 for Donald Trump. That will go in tilt for Trump. And lastly, the state of Georgia, where Kamala Harris has taken a 0.1% lead over Donald Trump in the state. Georgia for Harris in the tilt column. So that's 2.73 or 273, excuse me, for Harris and Walz, 246 for Donald Trump, with Pennsylvania an exact tie left outstanding at this time. So what am I getting at here with this exercise? And again, this is not a prediction. This is not what I think is going to happen. I'm just saying this is a hypothetical scenario to give you a little bit of an insight into how close this election really is. We're going to start out west with the state of Nevada. Just saying that the polls are off by 1 percentage point, we're going to add 1 point to Donald Trump. So, excuse me, we're actually going to start with Arizona. Trump is up by 1, give him another point, he'll be up by 2. So we're going to change Arizona from tilt Trump to lean Trump. Okay? Now we're going to go to the state of Nevada. Nevada, 0.6 for Harris, giving it 1 point to Donald Trump. Now we're going to move Nevada, from tilt for Harris to tilt for Trump. That's what 1 point being off in the polls does in the state of Nevada. Now we're going to look at the state of Wisconsin. 1.4% for Harris right now. Let's give 1 point to Donald Trump. That would still be 0.4. So Wisconsin actually stays in the tilt column for Kamala Harris at this time. So Wisconsin actually doesn't see a change in this scenario. The state of Michigan, 1.1%. It would be 0.1% for Harris over Trump with the 1 point added, 0.1 like in Georgia. So Michigan actually does not change. Pennsylvania, adding 1 point for Trump, would make it 48.2 to 47.2. In this scenario, we can assign Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. And in this scenario, Trump actually flips the presidency and wins it. So, and then North Carolina would then, if I'm correct here, that would move from 0.7 to 1.7. That would narrowly get it outside the tilt column, putting North Carolina in the lean column. And then lastly, looking at the state of Georgia, that 0.1 goes up to 1.1 for Trump. Georgia then flips to Donald Trump. So what I'm showing you here is just by giving Donald Trump 1% support added in each of these polls, flips the election. Kamala Harris narrowly won a close election based on the current polling averages right now. And by adding 1% to Donald Trump would narrowly win a very close election as of right now. But it's a very interesting conversation because, of course, I have no doubt Democrats will get very defensive about this and say, no, the polls are right, Kamala Harris is going to win, you're out of your mind. And the Republicans will probably get very defensive as well and say, no, this is not true, the polls are wrong, Trump is leading by a lot more than this. We're not going to know until Election Day. But these are very real scenarios that happened in 2016, almost happened in 2020, and could happen in 2024, which is why I think it's valuable to have these conversations. Again, this is giving Donald Trump 1% broadly across all the battleground states. In 2020, Joe Biden led broadly in the battlegrounds by 2%, 2.3%, and it got down to 0.03. So technically, that'd be adding 2 points to Trump's scenario in this time. I'm doing 1 percentage point because I want to show you just how close this election really is. This isn't a video to discredit the polls and say the polls are wrong. This is a video to show you just how close the 2024 presidential election really is. Every one of these states I just showed you, all the toss-up states right now, they're all under 2% of the vote right now, which is the margin Biden's polls were off of in 2020 and Clinton's in 2016. There is enough of a polling swing that if that happens again, for Trump to make up those numbers and win. That's without winning any undecided voters. So what I'm saying is, again, just to be clear here, because I'm sure there will be comments saying that I'm making a certain argument or push or agenda or something. What I'm saying here is, I'm not saying this is going to happen. Because, like I showed you, in this case of Pennsylvania in 2020, the polls were actually spot on in Pennsylvania. The numbers not so much, but the spread of victory for Biden over Trump, that was actually pretty accurate. And then For 2016 Pennsylvania, it was off by a point or two, but it wasn't off by like 6 points like Wisconsin was. Or 2020, where Wisconsin was still off by 6 points, but still got the winner correct. It's going to vary from state to state, but I think you can look at the map right now and just get the picture. This election is very close. And this is going to be an election where you hear the cliche, every vote matters, turnout matters, blah, blah, blah. But it truly is a case where right now, every vote I think really does matter, because just look at it. Every one of these states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, are all under 2% of the vote, which, if Trump has a really good night, could easily swing them all to his direction. Or, if Harris has a good night, could swing all the states to her direction. This election is very, very close and really coming down to the wire, and something we have to monitor going into the election, just how close this is. Which is why that debate coming up on September 10th, a few days from now, is going to be very, very important for the outcome of this race, because this race is razor tight right now, and I really don't see how this race can get any closer than it actually is at this moment. That'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like, click subscribe, share with your friends and family, and I hope to see you in a future video, as I'll be posting one every day leading up from now until Election Day. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.